Hi, everybody. Happy, sexy first Friday for January. I can't believe it's the new year already. It's a little chilly here. I'm going to put another coat on. And happy snow to those who have snow. And we're waiting for Lyndsey. Hopefully that works.
Hi.
It, it worked! Yay!
Try one. Yay.
Love to see it. Happy Friday and happy January. We're super excited to have Moree with us for our Type 2 episode today. So we'll let her introduce herself in just a moment. But we will introduce ourselves as usual, just in case this is your first time tuning in. So this is Sexy First Friday. Lyndsey and I do this the first Friday of every month, although it's technically the second Friday this time. We were giving people a chance to get through the holidays there last Friday. And we talk about the Enneagram, relationships, and sexuality topics, all different topics at the intersection of those things. I'm Sam E. Greenberg. I'm a sexuality researcher and Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. And my doctoral research focused on Enneagram type and instinct and how it overlaps with patterns of sexual desire and expression. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, Lyndsey, in case people don't know you.
Hi, I am Lyndsey Fraser. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist as well as a certified sex therapist. I'm out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I have a private practice where I specialize in relationships and sexuality utilizing the Enneagram. Oh, and I'm IAA accredited as well with the Enneagram. So that's a little bit about me. Many of you already know who we are. Why don't you talk a little bit about how we found Moree, Sam?
So it's kind of a special case this month. So if you've been tuning in, we're doing the Type and Sexuality series. We started with 9 all the way back in June, and we've done a different type each month, going from 9, 8, 7, etc. So we're at 2, and we were having a hard time finding a Type 2 guest and a Type 1 guest. I won't go into too big of a side thing, but in the research, it's been very hard to recruit Type 1s and 2s to sexuality research. So we put out a call to our followers for anyone who follows who was willing to be on the episode. And we got quite a bit of feedback actually, but Moree jumped right on the gun first. And here she is. We're so happy to have her. So Moree, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name's Moree Udaley. I'm actually a musician in Kansas City, Missouri. So there's lots of snow now. I've been following your guys' Enneagram stuff. I don't always get to watch the lives, but I always watch all of the specials and all your stories. And I've been kind of involved in like, ooh, I'll comment on that or anything like that. I am a self-preserving two. So at first I was like, yeah, they need help. I'm a two. And then I was like, what have I done? Oh no. So this will be fun. What the funny thing is I was thinking about it in terms of like, oh no, how am I going to help people? And then I realized like, oh no, it's not about me helping people. It's just about learning the inside of my head. So that helps actually. So here I am.
Perfect. Don't worry, we'll go super easy on you. We're just here to have, to ask some of our questions that we've gotten from followers to you because, we have a bunch of insight ourselves, obviously, but neither of us are type 2, so we don't know what the inside of your head is like you said. So we'll start like we always do, doing an overview of the type from the perspective of the clinical and research. So Lyndsey, why don't you start with what you see with twos in the clinical office, the therapy office?
So one of the interesting enough, I've never actually seen a self-preservation two in therapy. The majority of the twos that have come into the majority of the twos that have come in have actually been sexual and social. But one of the very interesting things I think around the sexuality piece is oftentimes what we see is that twos oftentimes are looking at more of like what the partner needs, wants, and desires. They want to meet those sexual needs of the partner in the sense that they oftentimes actually don't pay attention or even know what their own desires, needs, or wants are with that. I think one of the harder things sometimes around twos that can be hard to hear is that there can be a lot of like seduction type things that are happening in relationships to get the partner interested. It's like, I think I had my friend that's a sexual too said to me once, she's like, I want that person and I'm going to get that person and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get them interested and desired and wanting me. And I think that's very, very true for twos around the sexual realm, around relationships. And so sometimes what can happen with that is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about gender differences here in a minute too, because what I'm referring to here more is going to, right now, is going to be more about women than men, but I will touch on what men do that are twos as well, is that they will use like knowing how can I be the absolute best lover, seductress, do all the sexual things that you like and you want. And there can be a lot of this like very sexual, overtly sexual behavior happening and occurring. And then once they get into the relationship, there can sort of be like this fall off of that. And that can be very, very confusing for partners who don't understand exactly what happened. And one of the things that I've noticed is that once twos have sort of that emotional connection to the partner, the sex doesn't serve sort of the same sort of role that it served before. And so you might go from having a very highly sexual partner who's a two to then all of a sudden we're in a committed, close, emotionally connected relationship to maybe not a whole lot of sex happening or needing, or they will engage in sex if they are afraid that there's a little bit of like disconnection or something happening within the relationship. The interesting thing is that this refers more to women that are twos than men. So men that are twos, they will become like, if sex is not happening, they have huge concern that they are not loved, that they are not wanted. And they still are doing the same thing where they're trying to figure out exactly what the partner needs and wants from them, but they can get a little bit more anxious if like sex itself is not happening enough, because their like self-worth and who they are kind of gets wrapped up and tied into this. Part of why I think this might be the case, just from a sexuality perspective and as a sex therapist, is just the purpose of sexuality and what our society kind of puts on that. So if we think about men, for instance, right, a lot of the pressure that they get is sex is about performance and who you are as a man and your masculinity and sort of all of these sorts of things. And where women don't quite get that same message around sexuality. They still want to be pleasing and meet the partner's needs, but I think for men, it's more of like, if I'm not having sex, that says something about my worth and whether I'm lovable or not. And so there becomes it can be really complex, because there becomes, and honestly, I will say twos are some of the most complex in my office when it comes to sexuality and the sexuality work, because there can be some anxiousness from the men. Well, if you're more anxious, right, your partner is less likely to want to be sexual with you because it doesn't feel like about connection and bonding. And so then there can be this like, you're anxious, so I don't want to, and then the man's afraid that I'm not lovable. On the other end of that, there can almost be like, I don't need sex anymore for the women, because it's like, it served its purpose. I've got the relationship. I'm emotionally close to you. What do you mean? It's not as important anymore. And I know that this can be very hard for twos to hear. So if you're hearing this today and you're frustrated or angry with me as a two, I completely understand. Many of you typically are. But it is a reality of sort of how you show up in the sexuality area. And so that's a little bit about the clinical stuff. What would you add for the research component?
Okay, so I actually have a lot of things to say today on this type in the research. Before we get into asking Moree some of the questions we got. So quite a few things about twos here in the research. Number one is that twos score the highest of all types on what's called emotional bonding cues. That means they respond sexually to this category of cues that are called emotional bonding cues, which includes things like your partner expresses an interest in hearing about you, talking about the future together with your partner, feeling a sense of security in the relationship, feeling a sense of love with a partner, these like emotional closeness things. Twos are saying, oh my gosh, I love those. Not only do I love those, but they're sexy, right? And more than any other type by a long shot. Then we have twos second highest on romantic implicit desire cues, which is a different category of desire cues that would be more around like your traditional rom-com type of cues, watching a sunset together, candlelit dinner, dancing closely, whispering in each other's ears. Twos also are quite responsive to that group of cues, and they're second highest. And sevens are the highest mostly because sevens like everything. So it's actually really twos that like this. So the whole half of desire cues that are like these closeness and romantic cues, twos are absolutely really high on those things. Twos are also the highest of all types on saying yes, agreeing with my partner's pleasure is more important than my own. So, many of you could have predicted this. Um, I asked on my research this question, which is a validated survey question: is your partner's pleasure more important than yours? A bunch of types say it can be sometimes, but twos are like, yes, like definitively, and more than any other type. Then, and I think this is really interesting, twos are more sexually assertive than you might think. On our sexual assertiveness scale, they're right in the middle. So, I think a lot of people would assume that they're at the bottom, but they're not. That's our nines, our sixes, and we even have fives and ones who are less assertive than twos. This means that twos are telling or are able to tell their partner, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't like that. Yes, I do like this. That doesn't mean that they're not partner oriented, because they definitely are, see the previous data point, but twos are quite a bit more sexually assertive than you might think. Finally, you would see twos are a little higher on the BDSM and kink scale and participation than, one might predict. Up there with eights and fours are twos, but I will say that is driven by the sexual twos for sure. So that kind of takes me directly into subtype differences. I want to talk a little bit about that because we have Moree here as a self-preservation too. It's a very specific expression of two-ness. So just a little more on the research, since I'm already talking about research, I'll talk about the subtype research. So for like the example, the emotional bonding cues, that's my partner expresses interest in hearing about me, feeling close, feeling like talking about the future, that stuff. All three subtypes of two are in the top 5 subtypes for this. So sexual twos are the most, and then sexual fours, social twos, self-pres twos are next. Like all the twos are loving that, basically. But then we get down to the subtypes for the romantic cues. That's more driven by the sexual and social too. So in terms of like the mushy gushy romantic stuff, our self-pres twos, don't get me wrong, you're not going to necessarily like dislike it, but it's going to be our sexual twos, social twos that are most high on responsiveness to the romantic implicit stuff. And then again, like I already mentioned, for the subtypes in BDSM, it's really our twos, our sexual twos, that appear in the top 5 subtypes for kink and BDSM. It's not social two or self-pres two, but sexual two is so high that it really drove up twos into the top 3 types there. So Lyndsey, I think you could probably say a lot more about this, but the 3 subtypes of two are really quite different from each other, even more so than within some other types, and this does show up in sexuality. So what would you add, Lyndsey?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think so for instance, your sexual twos are going to be quite vocal and open as far as like what they want to engage in with sexuality. Like oftentimes actually the sexual two is the one bringing their partner into therapy about wanting things to be different within the sexual realm, but still also two-ish in the sense that and they're actually, now that I'm thinking about it, even with the sexual twos that are women, there can be a little bit more like if not enough sex is happening, you don't love me the way that you should love me, even though they might be a withholder of sex sometimes. It was so funny. After I said, I was like, oh my God, then I'm like, I'm going to make some twos upset today. The 9 is still there in me. So I'm sorry, twos, if I did. But hey, I just got to admit my own stuff. But I mean, I think there's the reality in that sense of like, wanting the partner to want them, but then getting maybe not always necessarily interested in actually being sexual. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And with your social twos, they can almost look a little bit more three-ish and be almost a little bit more like performance based around sex as well. So looking to like, you know, like what does society want me to be, as well as what the partner wants me to be. But they all look really different. And I think what's interesting with social twos is like it's really common for them to get mistyped as threes when they're not actually threes.
Let's not forget also that self-preservation twos are our concrete action twos. Self-pres twos are the ones who are helping in the, physical ways, like I'm making you dinner, I'm arranging this thing for you. Whereas sexual twos, it's much more of like a vibe thing, like I'm making you feel loved and wanted. So when you have self-pres twos, in sexuality, we get more like concretely them doing acts, for the partner, whereas a sexual two might be focused more on making them feel desired, social two making them feel, safe and bonded, things like that. I'll pause here because we just said a lot of things. Moree, before we get into questions, how is all of this resonating with your experience?
So, I mean, it checks out. I feel like in a lot of ways what you described about the male's perspective, I kind of feel like I'm like if you don't want me all the time, maybe I'm just not lovable. Like do you am I not good enough in bed? Like do am I not, and like I have no reason to feel that way, but it's just like it's in there and I'm like maybe I'm just bad at it. Um but with the romantic cues, I think it was, it's like I actually growing up, I got a sense of pride around acting like I don't need it. So it was like I don't need that. Like like the whole like, but I would love to watch the sunset. Oh, I would love a nice sweet date. But like I got this like sense of like I'm just so low maintenance. I don't need that. But then I'm like I do though. So here I am in my 30s being like I'm just kidding. I do want all of those things, and it's just funny because pride is the thing that twos struggle with the most from the research, and I'm like oh yeah, that is the thing. Because I don't want to appear needy, I don't want to appear like I'm a checklist or I'm a chore or like, so I'm like I will just put myself like here, but then if you're not in, oh no no, totally cool, totally fine, yeah, if you're not into it, I'm totally cool, don't worry about it, no, it's fine, no worries, can I make you dinner, like so that's how I feel about that, definitely. I figured out I was self-pres from actually one of your guys's talks on here. You were talking about the different stackings, and you said something about like, primal humans maybe wouldn't want to have sex if there might be a lion hiding behind the rock. Or you said something like that, and I was like, yes, it's me. I'm like, no, no, it's not safe. I'm not gonna get naked here and lay down if we're going to die. Like that's how I felt about that. And I was like, oh, okay. So that everything since then has been like resonating on that level because I wasn't quite sure what I was, and I know that upbringing kind of plays a weird role and all that, and you're like, you know, kind of a sheltered kid and trying to figure out, of course, being a sheltered kid and being a two that has pride, I'd be like, I wasn't sheltered, and try and put off a vibe that like I know exactly what I'm talking about when I don't. So yeah, I would say I agree with all of it, except that I might feel a little bit more like a dude in that aspect.
I love that you mentioned, trying to appear low maintenance. Twos, famously low maintenance. Wink, you're not at all, but we still love you. Twos, definitely not the one of the lower maintenance types. but they want to be because they don't want to feel like a burden on people, you know, everything you mentioned. So I think it makes perfect sense that you had these desires, but then you're like, no, no, only needy people have those. Let me just go ahead and suppress them. And I love that it's coming back around now that you're an adult, so you're realizing that you might deserve to have those. Well, we got quite a few questions in from followers that we'd love to ask you. So I think you're touching on this already, but one of the questions we had is someone said, my wife's a two. I feel like she sees sex as an expectation on her or a need of mine, meaning the husband, that she has to meet. And I think he was just kind of seeking some advice on that. So as a two yourself, you know, how would you respond to that?
Well, I don't want to feel like a chore at all. And then if it's something that like if if I so I yeah, I might turn it around on that if even if I'm just feeling the pressure of that, I'd be like, yeah, I don't like being put in the spotlight like that. And so feeling like there's the pressure on me to perform because I mean it is I would say even I related that with all the twos. Like there is an aspect of like performance because your pleasure is mine. Like when you feel it, I feel it. And that's what I need more than anything else is I need to know that you feel good about it and that you had a good time. And so yeah, it definitely with the getting overloaded, I think plays a big part. Or if there's not that reciprocation, like if I don't feel like I do sometimes feel like a little bit like if it's not turned around on me and I don't get that same kind of attention, then like maybe it's me, maybe I'm the problem. So I would say that there's a lot of different dynamics that could be happening, but how I would see it would be like, oh, well, maybe I'm not enough or I'm not doing enough if yeah, that's just kind of how I read that. It's just like, well, definitely as a criticism because I'm two.
I have a feeling that what this person wanted to ask is sort of like, how do I help her not feel that way? Like, how do I help her see that sex isn't an expectation or a need of mine she has to meet, but is this thing that we do together? And what I hear you saying is like, even raising that issue is like she might take it as a criticism of her.
Yeah, maybe just turn it around and give her the kind of love that you want to give her because if she feels like it's genuine coming from like from you, then she's going to feel it differently than just like is this what you want? Is this what you want? Cuz I want to feel what you want to give me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great advice. Lyndsey, do you have any additional perspective on this from working with twos?
Um, I think that it's, well, again, it's like getting in touch with their own pleasure, the two, right? But because their pleasure is so wrapped up in the other person's pleasure, it can be like I need to show up and I need to do this to be loved. And it's like part of it might be like in this particular circumstance, it's like the wife actually might need to do her own work. It isn't actually about the spouse or the partner. And that ability to be like, it is about my pleasure as well as my partner's pleasure. And how do I show up and ask for what I need or want as well? One thing I was curious about, like, is the emotional intimacy connection need being met? Because it could be even that sex becomes the chore when the emotional intimacy, especially with those, those cues that you're talking about. I think you said implicit romantic cues, but it's also emotional intimacy cues that
Yeah.
a lot of twos need and want in relationship. And so like if those emotional intimacy needs are not being met, it might become more mechanical and more about like, I need to do this to continue to have love in the relationship versus it being about like if I feel more emotionally connected to you, then it doesn't feel like so much of a chore to me. So that would be the thing that I would encourage to check in on is like, is the emotional connection there in the way that she needs?
Right. The emotional bonding cues are the most
Yeah.
important for twos. The romantic ones are kind of second most important,
Okay.
but those emotional bonding cues are by far most important. And that's like the sort of holistic thing about emotional safety. Like your partner saying loving things to you, you're feeling a sense of commitment from them. They're interested, you feel that they're interested in you. You know, you feel secure, you feel close. Twos absolutely need that, and that's, you know, the biggest turn on for them basically. So I think that's a great point, Lyndsey. If you know, those things aren't being met, they may not have this sort of natural desire. They may be having just, responsiveness to what they think the partner wants. Okay. Okay, well, another question we got, which I think is kind of interesting because it was asked about a non-sexual relationship, but I think it applies to both. Um, Someone wanted to know what's the best way to figure out what a type 2 really wants or really wants as a gift, in terms of the holidays they were thinking about. But specifically, the context here is that twos have a lot of pride about they don't have any needs. So when you ask them what they want, either, for a Christmas present or in bed, they're like, oh, no, I'm good. A lot of times I don't need anything. I just need you to be happy. I just need you to have a good time. Moree, you're even saying that. So this person is like, how do I figure out what you actually desire? So can you speak to that, Moree?
Yes. As I'm in therapy, which is hilarious that you mentioned that self-preserving twos are the least likely to do the couples therapy. Yes, I'm doing it and it's so fun. Um, but um, as far as like physical gifts, I would just say that like the fact that you thought of me in whatever you were doing and you thought that I would like this, like done. It can be a candle, it can be anything. But if you thought of me while you were giving it to me, and maybe even like tell me, hey, I I thought you would like this mug because look, it just looks, it's so cute and you'd like it. And I'd be like, what? Like, so the thoughtfulness of it, it's not exactly what it is that matters. It's more just like the fact that you were in the grocery store and you picked up that thing at the register, but you thought of me while you did it. It doesn't matter what it is. That touches my heart. So yes, as far as gifts that way. And in the bedroom, I guess I guess asking. I know that sounds weird, but like it's to bring up therapy again. It was several years ago. We had a therapist ask us. She asked me like, how do you tell him what you need, and not even just sexually, just like how do you tell him what you need? And I was going through my head and thinking like, I don't know. Because in my head, I was like, I don't have needs, I don't have needs, I don't have needs. And I'm like, I know I have them, but I couldn't think of any at the moment. And then I was like, I don't know. I don't have needs. I mean, I do, but I don't know. So there's a lot of drawing out that needs to happen in a loving way, because if it feels like a criticism, I'm going to feel like I'm not enough. And I'm going to feel like, oh, it's because I'm bad at this. Or did you not like what I did? Is it not good enough? Am I not pretty enough? Did I not do enough? So maybe even just a gentle asking like, hey, do you like this? What do you like? Or even as a funny conversation, like what's on your list or who's on your list, like the friends conversation where they're like, oh, your top five. Like, because if it starts out as like just a normal fun conversation, you'll draw out a lot more than if it's like, you like this, is this good for you? Because I'll feel like that I didn't do a good job.
I love that phrase, like a lot of drawing out needs to happen in a gentle way. I think that's really true of twos in every aspect of their existence. In coaching and therapy, there's a lot of drawing out that has to happen in a gentle way. And I admit to not being good at that. I'm really sorry, twos. Eights love me though, but I'm very direct, and twos do not like that. So the drawing out in a loving way, and another kind of hack or trick that I tell people is watch what they're doing for you. Watch what your two partner is doing for you, because that is a huge sign of the kind of care that they would like to have happen for them. And this brings up another thing I'd love to touch on with both of you, which is the difference between twos and nines, because people will get them confused. And one of the key differences is that underneath the top layer of their ego, twos do know what they want. And you can tell because they're doing it for you. They're asking you how you feel when they want to be asked how they feel. They're making you chicken soup when you're sick because they want you to make chicken soup when they're sick. This applies to the bedroom as well. And this is very different with nines, where if you say the kind of things you're suggesting, Moree, like, oh, what do you like? Nines actually genuinely don't know. So that's like a quite stark difference between them. That came up as one of the follower questions, the differences between twos and nines. So, Moree, love your advice, and I love that drawing out gently idea. So any more thoughts on maybe twos versus nines from you, Lyndsey, or more thoughts on how to help twos express their desires?
Well, I was actually going to say the same thing that you did as far as like, look what the two is doing for you. That's what they want you to do for them. Um, and that, and I think some twos are conscious of that, that's what they want, and some are not for the two thing. The difference between twos and nines is yes, twos actually do know more of what they want. There is more decisiveness, but there's like what Moree is saying. I don't want to have needs, so then I don't ask for the need. Versus like where a nine, as a nine myself, we oftentimes it takes a lot of like self-discovery and a lot of work to actually really get in touch with what you actually want and need. And so like when you ask a nine around sexuality, like what do you like, what do you want, when they answer I don't know, they really honestly do not know, and they have to do a significant amount of work to get in touch with what actually brings them pleasure. Twos oftentimes do know what brings them pleasure, but they don't want it to be about their needs or focusing on them. But then when you don't meet their needs, they're going to be a little frustrated with you. So I think that's a little bit of the difference as well, is that you might get the difference between a 2 and 9 is like when the needs are not being met, with a 2, you're going to get a little bit more of like frustration or like angstiness around some of that as well.
Um,
I have a question. Like, how do you support a 9 in that space? Honestly, it's giving them, so like a lot of things that I actually suggest is a lot of 9s need to sit and understand what creates more pleasure for them. And if you want to, you could refer back to the video that we did on 9 as well, which was actually the first in the series. But one way to do that, which I think honestly is good for everybody, so I'll just mention it again, which I have mentioned before, is like go and get a general sexuality book and read through the book and pay attention to body sensations, emotions, and thoughts. For 9s in particular, it's going to be intuitive, body, guttural stuff, right? That's going to let you know sort of like, what are the things that are pleasurable or enjoyable or turn me on? And so it's really paying a lot of attention to body sensations for 9s in particular. And it's also like not, and then like not being like, because like one of the things with 9s, like we're always anxious about having to ask for what we need or want. So then we finally do discover what we need or want. We don't necessarily ask for it. And we're like, if you ask a 2 and they do know what they need or want, they will tell you what they need or want. If you ask, they want to be asked.
there's a lot more to say about this. Like I have several other thoughts, but I'm wondering if maybe we can save it for our lookalikes episode, which we'll do probably in March. Because there is a lot, not just twos and nines, but a bunch of other things where they can look alike in the bedroom, and it's really helpful to get into some of the nuance. Because we're already at the end of time here. I want to share one final thing that both Lyndsey and I have used with clients, which is an exercise to do with a 2 partner, which is where you make a whole encounter or a whole amount of time just focused on their pleasure. There's you sort of like outlaw the partner being focused on them, and it's like all focused on the 2, and you explore together like that you ask them. Like they want to be asked, does this feel good? What do you like? Guide me. Let's like go through and make it about you. And 2s hate this. You're probably mad right now listening. Like you cringe every time you hear this. But if you can challenge yourself to show up in that space, it's a really big help in centering your pleasure and not just kind of being entangled with the partner's pleasure is your pleasure. So I wanted to throw that out there before we end. Any last thoughts from either of you?
I Yes, I do feel like it's like a split. Like that would be incredible. But then also like that would be terrifying. Like I love that, but so yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'll go schedule it.
That's exactly right. So it is terrifying because it challenges the entire, ego structure, type structure of the 2, which says that I am here to be oriented to others. So don't expect this to be easy for, almost most other types, not 9s, but most other types would be like, great, let's do that. But, for 2s and 9s, that's quite exposing and quite terrifying. So, it's baby steps towards that. So we're already at the end. Lyndsey, did you have any last things?
Yeah, I was just going to say that too. Like, sometimes, like, what I love about sort of the understanding of the Enneagram and sexuality is sometimes actually through that physical experience, you can have significant growth in even other aspects of your life. So, like, what does it mean to let go and someone meet my needs completely, right? And in the physical realm, sometimes there's also like that ability to be like, then you can physically feel that differently in your body that then creates change within how you show up and moves you out of that fixated state. And I think that that's one of the things that's beautiful about sort of sexuality work in general that we don't think about is that sometimes the sexuality work that we do that is more like maybe physical in the body and being present actually leads to significant growth in other aspects of our lives as well.
Perfect. Well, Moree, thank you so much for being here. We will be back next month, back to the first Friday of February with type ones, and then going into our lookalikes episodes, some other topics. Lyndsey and I also have a type and sexuality workshop coming up March 13th. So keep an eye out. We'll be posting information about that. That'll be on every type, but diving super deep. And am I forgetting anything? That's all I can think of for now.
No, I don't think so. It's just we're kind of coming to the end of our type series, which will be next month with the last, which is the type one. And I think that being said, if other people have like ideas of things that you'd like us to present on, or ideas or concepts, or start sending us ideas as well, because we have a few, but we of course always like to meet our audience's needs as well.
Thank you again, Moree. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It was fun.
Bye.
I hope it helped.
See everybody.
Happy Friday.